Would you please check your ideas and opinions at the door? All your philosophical and religious views, all your logic, because I say check it at the door advisedly because you can pick it up again when you go out if you feel unsafe without it. I'm not trying to argue you out of your opinions and views. I'm merely suggesting that for the sake of an experiment, you temporarily suspend them.
Hello and welcome to the Philosophical Minds podcast, an exploration of all things philosophical, alchemical, and esoteric, from the psycho-spiritual to the material-chemical nature of the all. Join me and my guests as we inquire into the liminality of mind and matter, and tend to the fertile soils of awareness and perception while facilitating an expanded consciousness from the individual to the collective. If you enjoy the show and find it of value, consider supporting and becoming a patron via the Patreon at patreon.com/philosophicalminds. A small contribution makes a big difference and definitely makes it easier for me to continue the show, although I will always do my best to keep it flowing regardless. Thank you all, and let's get into it. All right, I'm joined again with Ike Baker of Arcanum. It's with me today for kind of a little mini podcast, but one that I definitely think is going to be enjoyable and interesting for the listeners. I wanted to primarily discuss Hermetic timekeeping systems theory in regards to things like the call day and order and planetary hours and days of the week, and how that may relate to magical, alchemical, astrological systems, and so on. And so I thought that yourself, Ike, as well as Jamie Lamb, you guys would be two excellent individuals to consult about this stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'll preface this with saying that for the listeners, I myself am not suggesting that the order or these systems are not effective for particular effects or operations. I don't have much experience exploring these things, but I do think that there's definitely something there. I just don't quite understand so much. And I've talked with my friend Robert Lambert, for instance, who he does like extensive work with antimony, and he's pouring glass constantly, and he's literally spent days on end, like nonstop pouring, and he can see the windows where it appears like when the best times are. And he said that absolutely when he pours during the hour of Saturn in particular, it makes for a better quality glass and the colors are more vivid. And he's shared with me tons of different examples and photos, and he said not necessarily the day of Saturn though, but yeah, for some reason the hour of Saturn in particular. So that's just kind of an example from somebody I know personally that has had a ton of experience. But anyway, yeah, I want to explore these things further to help kind of mend my own confusions and try to see new perspectives and perhaps understand a little bit more about the theory. And I kind of think that I understand generally how the order is conceived, like based off of the Ptolemaic planetary order. But I don't know. So I want to ask you, Ike, say something like the days of the week to start. We've got like Monday Moon, Sunday Sun, Tuesday Mars, Wednesday Mercury, Thursday Jupiter, Friday Venus, and Saturday Saturn. So how do you yourself feel about like this particular order, and if it has any actual natural value in terms of any actual planetary energetic significance? I guess we'll just start with the days of the week first, and then I can kind of ask you about the hours. But yeah.
Sure. Well, that's first of all, it's very interesting that you mentioned you have a friend who works with antimony, and he does all the glass pouring and finds these little windows. I actually find similar things with plants. Believe it or not, we grow a lot out here, and I dabble in amateur herbalism and things like that, and there's definitely definitely a correlation to that. As far as the days of the week go, they're kind of this thing that you just take for granted. You're not really sure, where it comes from, or most of the time we're completely unaware that they're even named after, uh, uh, you know, pre-Christian Germanic gods. Um, but I definitely I've definitely spent a good amount of time working with the planetary hours. I guess your question is of the days of the week compare to I
Well,
guess energetically
yeah,
compared to the Chaldean order.
yeah, I wanted to I mean, you could tie it in both with the hours as well as if you wanted. I was gonna just first ask about the week because um there might be particular in magical systems, you might maybe do something like an operation on a specific day of the week that corresponds with a particular planet for maybe a more potentizing effect or whatnot. And I wanted to get your thoughts on if that's more of an egregore type of situation, or do you actually feel that the days do have a planetary energetic to them? And and if you want, we could get into the hours as well, but I was going to ask you kind of that separately because I think that it might maybe for you you might have an opinion about both of them that they both synergize really well together. I guess in my mind, that's kind of why I'm asking these things though, because I see a little bit of a difference between maybe the hours and then the actual days of the week and how they were all kind of derived and whatnot, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a very good question. Um, in terms of planetary energetics, it's kind of one of those things where I guess it is kind of confusing. Like I was mentioning before, you tend not to spend so much time thinking about things as, I don't want to say arbitrary because I don't think that they're arbitrary, but you don't spend as much time really scrutinizing things that are that close to you, that have just been away before you were born and will likely be away after you're gone, at least for some time. Um, what comes to mind when you ask about the planetary days, or those attributions, is that regardless of whether or not there's any actual, I would say, astrological or astronomical significance to that, we tend to use this as a schematic or groundwork for particular operations. And in doing that, you kind of auto generate a sequence itself. I think it was kind of interesting what you're talking about in terms of egregores. As always, I feel like it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. In terms of my personal experience, it's a little difficult because I've not done an experiment, to be honest, to see if to sort of test against that kind of thing. But for instance, I've done planetary magic on a Thursday, in the day and hour of Jupiter, and then I've gone to work and to find that I have literally 10 minutes. I like running out the door, did this planetary hexagram, right? I don't do mundane magic. I'm not poo-pooing anybody who does. I just don't do it. If there's any kind of magic that I do, it's, which is frequent, it's towards a spiritual end, an alchemical end. But these energies kind of fly; they go wherever you direct them. So, done a Jupiter ritual, and then gone to work immediately to find out that I've now been given a raise. I've done Venus rituals in the day and hour on Friday, the day of hour of Venus, and then I've been on a break from work at a coffee shop and been approached by several people who just want to talk, hang out. It's a very it's a very uncanny thing to witness. Now, whether or not I can objectively say that the schema of the planetary days, their assignment to those particular ones, have any verifiable um, or objectively quantifiable sort of energetic power outside of the systems we've imposed upon them, no clue. To me, a lot of time can seem arbitrary. A lot of these things can seem that way. It's really once you start getting in flow and start working with things and dialing down to stuff like the planetary hours, or for instance, in the Eastern system, the Totvic tides, that you find out whether or not it works. So, essentially, magic and theories of magic, at least from a Western esoteric perspective, it's kind of a chicken or the egg. Everything is outside of us, but that stuff is also within us. And it's through the interior that we can access, I guess, the blueprint of the exterior and make changes there. So for me, from my personal experience, my experiments, there is definitely something to the day and hour formulation. Absolutely, there is something to the day and hour. Now, it can be used kind of like you can permute these things. They permutate with one another. You could say use a combination of um, growing hyssop, a Jupiterian planet, in the uh, day of Jupiter and hour of Venus or something like that, to get much more of an earth element from it. You could drill down to the elemental attributions of the planetary significators and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it's been pretty powerful. In that case, there is, I guess I wouldn't call that mundane magic per se, more so I guess astrological herbalism. I'm not necessarily doing anything to get something. I'm just kind of experimenting with this day and hour formula with plants and plant material.
Yeah, that was great. And then yeah, if we could maybe kind of get into the planetary hours a little bit. So with planetary hours, if we kind of look at the hours, I think it's I'm not positive. I think it's different depending on the geological location. But yeah, maybe what's a quick summary of how we define the hours? I might have it wrong, but does the first planetary hour of the day that sets the starting point depend on the planetary day as well? Or yeah, maybe you could just go into that a little bit briefly.
Yeah. So one thing that I want to say is that the reason why, or one of the theories as to why the planetary hour is dependent on sunrise. It's technically it's the hour of sunrise of the particular planetary day. So sunrise on a Sunday is the hour of the sun, day and hour of the sun. Um, Sunrise on a Tuesday is the day and hour of Mars. So that's kind of the formula. Now, kind of what you're alluding to is okay, that changes depending on where you are. Now, there is an energetic theory that bases a lot of this stuff on the etheric magnitude of, I guess you'd call it the etheric magnitude of the moon. The moon is very, very, very significant in magical workings, particularly because it has a very, very strong correlation to different types of magic by way of the etheric field or the etheric body. Now, when the sun uh, sort of rises, and as it's heading towards its apex in the sky, it has this sort of, and you can feel it, it has this sort of effect that washes out any previous sort of etheric structure or relationship. In other words, if you're doing some kind of very light magic, uh, something like the lesser invoking ritual of the pentagram, or the lesser banishing ritual, you're going to want to do these things at probably the time you go to sleep and the time that you wake up. And that's just to account for this sort of washing away or cleaning of the slate of the etheric tides at sunrise. So in this sense, the sort of restarting of that clock now from an energetic theory, there begins the new cycle, and it's the day and hour of the planet whose regency is associated with the particular day. And these days were assigned by the Mesopotamians. They believed the planets to be the actual physical bodies of the gods.
Okay, and then so with that, there's that's okay, that's really cool what you're talking about with like the effects of the etheric tides. I want to touch on that a little bit more, but so what you just said about how these planets were or these days or they're defined originally by the Mesopotamians, but then like for me what comes to my mind is like things like the Gregorian calendar shifts historically. And then if that kind of comes into play
Mhm.
and in like if calendars are shifted over time, wouldn't that maybe shift the original days and times, and then if so, then I don't know how that would be accounted for, or maybe it kind of just goes back to the whole idea of it being sort of a framework to work with. I'm not sure. I would like to get your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I do want to say that I'm kind of understanding where the discrepancy is now, whereas it was kind of tricky to figure out where everything was kind of not gelling. And what you have to understand about the assignment of time from a human perspective is that it is entirely arbitrary for the most part. Now, what is not arbitrary is the lunar cycles. And that is something that we still base our system of a year on. Month is short, or it's kind of an evolution of month. We're following these lunar cycles. It has changed. It's not it's not as fixed to those things. So yeah, there's going to be certain kinds of discrepancies. We've got daylight savings, we have leap year, we have all sorts of crazy sort of mechanisms that we, for one reason or another, have to throw in there to make the hours back or push them forward, and things like that. But really what we're talking about here is we're talking about an etheric interplay between sun and moon, that's really setting everything up, right? Because those are first of all, the moon is the closest one, the closest body to us, and the sun is of the largest magnitude and consequence, because it brings light and life to the earth, and we're literally suspended in its beams, in its rays. And there are a lot of people will say, well, look, the only planet where we can verifiably say that it has an effect on the tides, it has an effect on menstrual cycles. Yeah, but what about the sun? We'd be dead if it weren't for the sun. Matter of fact, the moon only reflects light of the sun, so you need the sun to have the moon. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. This is really cool. I've actually never really kind of thought about it in these ways when you're talking about the effects. We're talking about like the washing out in regards to the sun, like the etheric. magnetism of the solar and then the etheric magnitude of the lunar and the interplay between these. And when you're saying like the etheric tides of things, and then earlier you mentioned the Totvic tides maybe in the Eastern system. I was wondering, is that related to the like
Yeah.
the Tatvas?
Hmm. Yes, that's exactly it. Essentially, so if you really look at these systems, what they're doing is they're trying to measure this sort of undulation of etheric energy and how it permutates on a sort of essential basis. Now, whether you're using the septenary system of the planets that we use here in the West, or you use the Totvic system, it's basically the same idea, right? Because the planetary attributions also have they have elemental correspondences and things that happen with that, and that's very important. So the Totvic stuff actually was I think originated by the Tamil Siddhas of ancient uh, India, and they were essentially sort of mystics, priests, and medicine men of their time, and they essentially created this idea of this five element theory, which is, there is a one-to-one correspondence for the most part to the Western theory. So you have all the elemental correspondences, apas, vayu, prithvi, and I'm forgetting one, but it's fire, air, earth, water, and then akasa, which kind of takes the place for us of what in the five elemental theory of Western occultism or esotericism would be spirit, or pneuma. And they kind of mean similar things, right? Because akasa kind of means space more so than anything else. Almost, I guess, implying perhaps a vacuum of sorts, or perhaps the plenum, right? The plenum, the empty fullness from which all the other elements forth, and it's basically the generative ground from which the substances of manifestation are able to come forth. And it's kind of the same idea in the Western system. And you know, kind of that idea of, I guess, the Rosicrucian ne quaquam vacuum, in nowhere a void, right? You have spirit interpenetrates and permeates everything. So there's kind of a one-to-one correlation. And I've done a little bit of experimentation with turning the Totvic tides into a Western elemental system, and actually it's been pretty good actually for gardening and for exercise in the past.
All right, picking back up from a little break, some technical difficulties. I think where we last left off, I was giving you some comments about how I like the way that you were tying together a lot of these various systems, such as the kind of the Eastern like Totvic systems with the Western elemental system and kind of the Kabbalistic understanding that you had mentioned with like the ground. And then I posed my next question, which was in regards to the septenary understanding of things and their energetic correspondences. And one of the major points of confusion in regards to a lot of these diagrams that we see within these models that are positioning Venus and Mercury in opposite places. When we look at a lot of these diagrams, you can see that next to the sun is actually Venus, not Mercury, and that's one of the major points of confusion that has been for myself as well as some other people. So yeah, just would like to get your thoughts and reflections on why you think that is and what is the confusion that may be occurring. And yeah, go ahead.
All right. So the question is basically why in say things like the Chaldean order and certain diagrams of the Ptolemaic model of the universe, why does Mercury fall between or Venus fall between Mercury and the Sun when that's not its natural placement, successive order, right? Correct.
Correct. Absolutely.
So the thing there is that the Chaldean order specifically, and a lot of these more ancient systems are based on the speed, the relative speed of the planets from slowest to fastest from our georeferential position on the Earth, right? So georeferential is well, very different than geocentric. And the main point, the main difference is that georeferential is basically saying I'm aware that while the Earth isn't the center of gravity or the locus point, the axis for our solar system, it's still the only perspective I have with which to operate from my subjective experience. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it may as well be geocentric for the calculations and operations that we're attempting to do, right? This is my Earth. This is my starting point, right? This is my Malkuth of Asaya. This is my Earth. So it's georeferential. Taking that a step further, I think you were asking about the Chaldean order.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I mean, so the main right, I think we may have caught this. I can't remember, but the main point of contention there was that time, for all intents and purposes, does follow this kind of lunar cycle, right? Just because that's the way we have structured months, right? Typically 4-week cycles. Every 3 months there's 5. But we're following the month, right? Month. That's really what it's in evolution of. So time will of itself will adhere to these basic different interactions between the sun and the moon, right? That's ultimately the main issue that people have. We have this very fixed sense of time, but what is time but a construct that we make to measure change and be able to reliably time things like crops and all that stuff, when in actuality it's this interplay of light and life to the Earth, and the moon is very intimately linked with the etheric body, and those kind of psychosexual energies that are present within us, with which we use these energies for magic. I mean, that's literally what we're doing when we work with these energies. Now, as far as the Chaldean order goes, going back to the Mesopotamians, there's a book, and Jamie recommended it to me, and he speaks about it quite often. It's called Stellar Theology and Masonic Astronomy, and it's by a Mason named Robert Hewitt Brown. And I'd recommend this book to anybody as well, particularly anybody interested in these kind of solar myths. But the sun being, of inestimable importance. The moon does have a relationship to the tides and to menstrual cycles and things like that. But at the end of the day, the sun keeps us alive, and really it's the sun's light we're receiving from the moon. So Robert Hewitt Brown kind of goes into this astrological myth of the sun. Now, from Earth, from our georeferential position, in, let's say, where I am in the northern hemisphere, the sun is always in the southern sky. And this trajectory, this arc of the sun in the sky is called the ecliptic, right? And so that's the main difference between sidereal and tropical astrology. Sidereal astrology says that we're basing these energies and these permutations off of where the constellations are. Well, the constellations have moved. And really, when you look at it from a little bit of a theosophical perspective, the sun was the prism through which all these planetary energies kind of passed and congealed, and then was brought forth, projected forth in the rays of the sun with everything else, that comes with that, and directed towards the earth. So we're dealing with tropical astrology, which is basically, it takes the signs of the zodiac, the zodiacal belt, the ecliptic. It's basically saying that these zodiacal attributions are segments of the ecliptic. They're parts on the trajectory of the sun through the sky. Well, you have the eminently Masonic kind of idea of this tale of the immortality of the soul, and how it's not only it's not just a metaphysical law or principle, but we see that analogized, or we see it imprinted into physical laws of things down here, right? It's this constant thing of, yes, there's an apparent death, but there's also a rebirth. Energy can neither be generated or destroyed, only transformed, right? It's that whole kind of idea. So that said, if you take and this is the point that Robert Hewitt Brown was attempting to make, and I really give it credence. If you take the position of the zodiacal belt, the zodiacal arc, in which the sun travels from its apparent death in winter towards the vernal equinox, you come up with Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo. Now, what do we have there? If you follow the classical scheme of rulerships, okay, that means only the 7 planets of antiquity, which we could see with the naked eye, visible in the sky. So getting rid of the outer planets, Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune, and we're focusing on those 7 planets. Now, in the classical scheme of rulerships, you have Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. Aries is ruled by Mars. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Gemini ruled by Mercury. Cancer, the moon. And then Leo somehow is domicile of the sun. And in summer, makes perfect sense. Beauty and glory of the year. Now, why would, in the Chaldean order and in some of these other orders, why would the sun be placed between Mars and Venus? Well, in ancient times, right, due to something called the precession of the equinoxes, our vernal or spring equinox did not take place where it takes place now, on or about the 21st or 23rd of March. It took place in the same kind of cusp window between April and May. In other words, between Aries and Taurus. In other words, between Mars and Venus. And so the sun, on its trajectory away or through this apparent death in winter, rose at that point between Aries and Taurus on the cusp of April and May to be born again. Sol Invictus, light and life. So that is a powerful interpretation of that stuff. And, it's eminently Masonic, and it has everything to do with, I would say, the nucleus of the Western esoteric tradition.
Beautiful. And then, yeah, speaking for myself, I'm just thinking that when at least for myself, when I've been looking at a lot of these things, these various diagrams and these old depictions of the planetary things, I've probably been projecting a lot of my own naive understandings of what I'm thinking that they're representing versus what they might have actually been trying to convey. And that was something I was saying to you earlier, that I think back in these times with these more intellectually minded individuals trying to figure all this stuff out, I bet it was just a massive confusion from them kind of being disseminated down into the general society at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, if you really think about it, most of society for most of time has been illiterate. So probably, we're too busy tending to the sheep and corn crops to um, even be aware of any of this stuff. And in our own way, right? We're still, when we're working our way out of or feeling our way in the dark through this, just extracting ourselves from this super materialistic, super nominalist, super Cartesian paradigm in which we're really died in our society. We are, to a degree, at first ignorant of our own ignorance, right? I mean, who could blame any of us for not being able to go much deeper than just a superficial understanding of this stuff? I mean, that's really where it all starts. But that is the quest of any true seeker. I do firmly believe that uh, you must leave no stone unturned, because you have to really do it yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you, and gather enough understanding from enough broad swaths of time, culture, disciplines, to be able to find context. That's the whole thing. We're bereft of context. We're, in terms of a period of time, we're like this little island that's just floating somewhere out, between the 1950s and the abyss. That's our kind of scope of we have a lot of cultural amnesia as well. So there's always that, and you're not going to necessarily get all that from books, right? I mean, because there's lots of books, there's lots of great books. You can't read all of them. You can't even read a little bit of them. So you have to pick which books. You have to be able to develop a bullshit meter that allows you to not waste time on any books that aren't kind of really clicking into that world picture of context and then also your lived experience, right? I mean, I say it a lot, but it definitely bears repeating. You have to learn in this path to vet, but trust your subjective experience.
Yes. And on the lower level, definitely doesn't even, matter from a geocentric to a heliocentric view, whatever. What's the center, the sun, the earth? I couldn't agree more. And I think that when you look at these things from all these various, the planetary rulership, relationship, the energetic exchange dynamics, depending, like you said, on context and subjective experience, and you link and merge all of these various things together, understand what you can about them, connect the dots, you definitely arrive at a more holistic understanding that's not just some linear path as things might be you might want them to be. But yeah, so any last closing thoughts on these subject matters, anything that you want to put out there in closing for the audience?
Yeah, just in closing, it's like you're talking about linear ways of seeing things, and it serves us to a purpose, but you have to be able to do both, right? Because the truth is always a combination of two things, and the truth can be somewhat paradoxical, and we, much of our lives is learning to deal with that and reconcile that. You take a tree, for example, right? I mean, it's the quintessential product of nature. Well, it's objectively verifiable, and it has lots of scientific qualities to it, that we can say this is what comprises a tree. It's made of these constituent parts, and it works this way. But what does it do? What is its function? Well, it does a lot of things, right? I mean, it gives us oxygen, it reabsorbs CO2, it bears fruit for food, it can provide shade, it can provide wood, it can provide shelter. So it's never this or that, really. It's a popular quote, I forget who said it, but the truth is always resisting simplicity. And that's more the journey of the seeker, is to be able to see truth in all of its forms and be okay with the contradiction, stand in the midst of the contradiction, because you are the reconciler between them.
Absolutely beautiful. I appreciate you greatly. Thank you so much for doing this, Ike. Where do you want to direct people to find you, your channels, any of your links, anything that you want to point people in the direction of?
Well, I have an article that's being published in a great publication. It's a book format. It's called The Light Extended, a Journal of the Golden Dawn. And I'll be in volume 5, which comes out this year. It's got some great contributors, and has, right? There's been 4 volumes up to now. Jamie's been in it, Chicken Tabby Cicero, Friday Yakita, Jane Gibson, just a ton of real top brass and luminaries, big thinkers and big contributors. So I'm anyone who's interested in the intersection between magic and masonry and all this stuff we talk about. It's all very, very pertinent in that particular community. The other thing is that I am going to be given a class this year at the Institute of Hermetic Studies, and it's going to be on I'll be teaching the first book, Natural Magic, of Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy. Jamie Lamb is going to be doing the second one, Celestial Magic. I'm not sure who's going to be teaching the third class just yet. Might be Mark Stavish, but that will also be sometime this year, and I will definitely be updating people on that. The last thing, I guess, is just my YouTube page, the Arcanum YouTube channel, as well as the weekly podcast that you can find at youtube.com/at Arcanum, ARCAN VM. So I typeset the U as a V.
Right, with a V. Don't forget. I'm super thrilled. I think that's awesome, that project that you guys are going to be working on with going through those 3 books of Agrippa, because wow, that's going to be something people are going to love for sure. So I'll definitely be staying tuned to learn more about that, and hope everybody else does too. Highly encourage everybody to check out Ike's awesome channel, Arcanum with a V, on YouTube. It's definitely one of my favorite. I pretty much listen to everything that you've been putting out. Thank you so much again. Greatly appreciate you and all your work, Ike.
Thank you, Sky. I really appreciate it. I love talking to you, and hopefully we'll get to do it again soon.